All right, moving on. Now we do see our first phase shift on this one. B is 1. Phase shift negative pi over 6. Inline 0. All right, this is more difficult. Earlier, I would plot this point first. I'll do that, but I can see the units of this graph don't have pi over 6's. So how do I plot pi over 6? I will probably convert this scale so that it does have a unit that I can plot pi over 6 on. So I will get the, I could turn this into fourths. That's not what I'm going to use, but if I did do that, I would be like 2 pi over 4. This would be 4 pi over 4. I'd have to convert all these fractions. But once I get a couple, I can, instead of converting them, I can just count this 2 pi over 4, 4 pi over 4, 6 pi over 4, 8 pi over 4. But that's not the unit I want because, that's not 6. So I need to get the least common denominator between 6 and 2, which is just 6. And I need to do that. I need to accommodate both things, the period and the phase shift, because both of these are horizontal. Both of these units will have to be graphable on this scale. But in this case, it's sixths. So let's see, I'll convert this to sixths. So let's multiply top and bottom by 3, because I want that to be a 6. So 3 pi over 6. Even from there, I can start counting. That's 3 pi over 6. This is 6 pi over 6. And I'm counting by 3's. 3, 6, 9 pi over 6. Oops. 3, 6, 9, 12 pi over 6. 9, 12, 15, 18. And I guess since I'm going backwards to negative pi over 6, I guess I'll need to go this way too. 3 pi over 6. All right, it's still a little unfortunate because I don't have pi over 6. It's an odd scale. So if that's 3 pi over 6, I guess I'll have to break that into thirds, something like that. Terrible. All right, so here we go. Negative pi over 6, 0 is right there. And then we'll go back to our the procedure we were doing before we make our little box. All right, so we've got that point. Now we go up in amplitude, down in amplitude, and then we'll have to go right by a period, which is not just 2 pi anymore, because we're starting at negative pi over 6. So I'm going to have to do negative pi over 6 plus 2 pi. That's what I'm trying to do, negative pi over 6, and then I need to go over to the right, 2 pi. All right, so 2 pi is the same as 12 pi over 6. So 11 pi over 6 is 2 pi units away from negative pi over 6. 11 pi over 6 is 2 pi units to the right of negative pi over 6. So there's 12 pi over 6, so this will be the end of my box. I'm kind of just eyeballing 11 pi over 6. This is 9, 10, 11, 12. And then I need my quarter periods. I guess I could just eyeball this stuff. I could just eyeball halfway and then cut those halves in halves, but not sure if the teacher will accept that. So I will actually calculate the quarter period in terms of sixths, because that's my scale. So it's 3 pi over 6. So let me count over by 3 pi over 6. It's still going to be a pain. So it's negative 1, 0, 1, 2. That's 3 pi over 6, right? 1, 2, 3 pi over 6. That's my first quarter period. Let's see, what am I at? That's 2 pi over 6. So let me add another quarter period. Very difficult. So now I'm adding 6 pi over 6, 2 quarter periods. I'm not sure I should keep counting it because I'm not sure how accurate I'm going to be. Oh man. So I'll do it numerically. So my starting point, negative pi over 6 plus 2 quarter periods, right, 2 of these guys, equals 5 pi over 6. All right, so this should be where my halfway point is. This is 2 quarter periods away from my starting point. So 5 pi over 6 is about right there. And then I'll have to add, maybe I'll just add another quarter period to that. So 8 pi over 6 is my third interval. Okay, and I'm right here at 5 pi over 6. I'm going to get to 8 pi over 6. So here's 9, so I guess I'll eyeball it. That's 8. Some teachers would want you to label these points also. Maybe I'll do that. 8 pi over 6, 5 pi over 6, 2 pi over 6. Since it's sine, it starts in the middle, goes high, middle, low, middle. All right, that was a lot harder than the last problems, and a lot of the reason it was hard is because our graph was in a unit that was not accommodating to our phase shift. And I had no choice. This was the graph they gave us. But if you're making your own graph, of course, it would be a lot easier if you had just from the start chosen your x scale to be in sixths. It really wouldn't be that bad. So this would be like negative pi over 6. You could just 1 pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, 3 pi over 6, and so on. You'd have to draw a lot of these all the way up to 11 pi over 6 to get our full period in. But that would make the counting a lot easier. Then you could just identify a quarter period and just, you'd be able to just take 3 steps up, 3 steps up, 3 steps up. I'm not sure the teacher fully considered how she made this graph. Or maybe she did. All right, looks like we're gonna have the same problem here because the phase shift is in a unit that's not shown on this graph. All right, let's try it. So what's a unit? What's a denominator that I can't turn this into thirds, but I can turn it into sixths. Yeah, I need something that will accommodate both of these, which is sixths. So terrible. All right, 3, 6, 9. Yeah, I think I paused my video accidentally. I just have to guess where I paused it. So in this one, I had my phase shift, but I decided to convert that into sixths. I also decided to convert my period and my quarter period into sixths, since I made the scale of my graph have sixths. So and the reason that is because my phase shift was in thirds, but my graph was in halves, and my quarter period was in halves. So it was these two denominators that forced me to go to sixths. That was the least common denominator for 2 and 3. And then before I started graphing, I changed the scale. Like I said, I'd already done that before I paused. All right. So once I have my starting point, I graph that 8 pi over 6 is about like right there. So that's 6 pi over 6, 9 pi over 6. So 8's got to be right there. 6, 7, 8, 9. And then I go up in amplitude, down in amplitude. And then I usually draw the end of my box, so I need to add a period to my starting point. So my starting point was 8 pi over 6, and I add a full period. The period in this case is 2 pi, which is the same as 12 pi over 6. So I add my starting point plus a period, gives me my end point, 20 pi over 6, which is off my graph. So I had to extend the graph a little bit. 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, so 20 is about right there. And then I had enough information to draw the little box. And then I got to fill in these quarter periods. So my starting point is 8 pi over 6, and each quarter period is the same size. They're all 3 pi over 6. So I added 3 pi over 6 to get the first interval, 11 pi over 6. And I added another 3 pi over 6. Right, that's my quarter period. To get 14 pi over 6. Let's see, 14's about right there, just shy of 15. Add another quarter period. 14 turned into 17. My graph has 18 right there, so I put 17 right there. And if I add another quarter period, that gets me to the very end of the cycle, which I already have that point graphed. Once I have my quarter periods, sine starts middle, high, middle, low, middle. And then for bonus, I decided to go back a couple of quarter periods also. So I knew my starting point was 8 pi over 6. So I subtracted 3 pi over 6. 8 minus 3 is 5. This is 6, so this is 5. What a pain. And then I even went back one more quarter period. It's probably not necessary. Usually just one period is enough. All right, really happy to see this one doesn't have a phase shift. Those are definitely the worst. Period is 2 pi. Quarter period, pi over 2. Phase shift 0, and it's our first time having a midline 1. And technically just the midline is y equals 1, which is a horizontal line. So if the teacher actually asks what the midline is, you don't say m equals 1. You would have to give this as an answer. But for me, I'm just going to say m equals 1. All right, so I start by graphing this point 0, 1, 0, 1. And I go up in amplitude, down in amplitude, and then to the right by a period. Luckily, I'm starting at 0, so it's easy to add a period. And I've got my little box. Quarter period's pi over 2. Sine starts middle. All right. This one's pretty similar, just the midline is down instead of up. So I'll start by graphing that point 0, -1, up in amplitude, down in amplitude, to the right by my period, little Cosine, oh, I gotta do my quarter periods. Cosine starts high, middle, low, middle, high. It's a little bit subtle, the difference between the phase shift and the midline, because they're both like could be plus or minus 1, but it's the difference is whether it's inside the parentheses or outside. This one's outside. If there had been parentheses there, this would be a phase shift to the right one. So outside the parentheses is a vertical shift. It's the midline. We start by plotting that point, up a period, or up an amplitude, down an amplitude, straight away to the middle of the box on the other side, and these quarter periods. Cosine, high, middle, low. Dang it. So terrible, and it's the same thing, it's the sixth, which doesn't match, and this thing's really awkward to turn into sixth, because we have to like cut it into some uneven interval. All right, so the common denominator is still 6. So I'm going to convert this into 6, multiply top and bottom by 3, then I'll start counting over 3, 6. Try and write small. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. All right. I'm going to convert this and this and this into sixths. Okay, I'm starting at negative pi over 6. That's my starting point. I'll add 3 pi over 6 to get my first quarter period. So negative 1 pi plus 3 pi is 2 pi. I'll add another 3 pi over 6, another quarter period, 5 pi over 6. Add another quarter period, 8 pi over 6. I don't need to add the last one, but 11 pi over 6. So I added 1 quarter, 2 quarter, 3 quarter, 4 quarters. So I guess at this point I've added a full period. Normally I do that separately. I take my starting point and add a period, 12 pi over 6. Pi over 6. But I guess that's the same as adding 4 quarters. So the end of my box will occur at 11 pi over 6. Here's my start, and if I go over a full period, it should end at 11 pi over 6. All right. Up a period, up an amplitude, down an amplitude. Here's the end, up an amplitude, down an amplitude. And then it's 2 pi over 6 is my first quarter period, 5 pi over 6, 8 pi over 6, and then 11 pi over 6. Sine starts in the middle. B is 4, A is 1. This is D, I guess, or my midline, 2. C is 0, so the phase shift is 0. Alright, and then my quarter period is pi over 8. So I can see that's not on my graph, but pi over 8, I guess that's easy enough to graph, since these are, each of these is a quarter of a pi. It's easy to make 8s of pi's. So I don't have to worry about any common denominator thing, I guess. We'll see. All right, so I get my starting point, 0, -2, up in amplitude, down in amplitude, and to the right by a period, which is pi over 2. Not too bad. Then my quarter periods are pi over 8, which I can just cut this in half and then cut those halves in halves. But yeah, that is pi over 8. And cosine starts high, middle, low,